you feeling blue? How do you do? Or are you feeling glad? No matter the day, come what may, there's an adventure to be had.
Good afternoon and welcome to a live edition of Mid-South Viewpoint. How do you do? Mr. How do you do is our guest today on this program, and we're welcoming to the show some ladies we're going to introduce in just a moment. A couple of house things I want to cover, and that is one of which is this Friday night, by the way, is the Family Fall Fest at Hope Presbyterian Church in Cordova. It's always a big event this Friday night from 5:30 till 9. There's food, candy, inflatables, all kinds of fun stuff for the family. Admission, I think, just $4. Kids 2 and under get in free. But this is really a big family event. Hope goes all out for this. And other churches are too. I just happened to get an email this morning about Hope's Family Fall Fest, so we wanted to go ahead and make mention of that. And if you have something taking place in your church over the next few days, this weekend coming up in light of Halloween for a Family Fall Fest, please let us know, because we'll try to get that word out, share with our Bot Radio Network, AM 640 listeners and FM 100.7 listeners, so that they can come in and participate. And a lot of these events are close together, and so you can just kind of hop from one to the other. We always enjoyed going with our now granddaughter and taking her to some of these. So it's a great family event. But again, Hope's event is in Cordova this Friday night at Hope Church, 5:30 to 9. Come on out, bring the family. Also, I'd like to ask our Bot Radio Network family to be in prayer for the Weatherwax family. Phil and Janie Weatherwax and other family members were involved in an automobile accident over the weekend. I understand the injuries were quite serious. In light of the situation, they are in recovery mode right now. Still in the hospital, but we just want to pray. Of course, Phil Weatherwax has been a longtime friend of mine. He was on staff for many years at Bellevue Baptist Church. He has a heart for a soul winner. Maybe someone that's listening to our program right now in one of the area prisons, because we know we have people who listen to our station in prison, and we welcome our prisoners, and thank you for listening. Phil has a heart for prisoners and those serving time in prison, and has spent many times with other men to go in and share the gospel and just love on men in prison. So maybe you've been ministered to by Phil in the past. If you would pray for him, we just lift him and his wife Janie up now as they are in recovery mode and believing our God is able to heal. So with that said, we want to welcome you again to this live program. And there's one lady that is so exciting to be with, and it's Kelly Johnson. Kelly, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I mean, you're just always somewhere. I look on Facebook and either in this city or that city, and ever since this whole creation of Mr. How Do You Do has come alive, you have been on the road and you've been sharing the story.
I have, and Jesus has certainly taken us to a lot of different cities.
Yeah, I know. And I don't know if were you expecting it to blow up like it has?
Well, I think there's been a pattern in my life. When I obey the Lord, He just shows up and shows out in amazing ways. So I'm not surprised. I may not have expected it to blow up this soon, as amazingly as it has done. But
let's go back for our listeners who are wondering, what are you talking about, Mr. How Do You Do? Now, you originally had a burden for the city of Memphis. Never had been to the city of Memphis. You're from Maryland, I believe, originally?
Actually from New Hampshire, but I was in Maryland.
You were in Maryland,
yes.
But you're from New Hampshire. But God just placed in your heart our city, Memphis.
Yes.
And you started praying before you even stepped foot into our town.
Absolutely. He gave me a real heart burden to pray for this city, a heart for reconciliation. And that's what I did. Just began simple steps of obedience, praying for Memphis. And
it really kind of initiated this prayer movement, 2 by 2, and the House of Prayer. And it's just an exciting, venture that God has carried you on.
That's been amazing. Yes.
And really, I think what's exciting too, Kelly, is this has been a faith journey. And doesn't the Bible teach us that without faith it's impossible to please Him? And as we have received Christ Jesus, we're to walk in Him. So if we've received Him by faith, we're to walk in Him by faith. That opens up all kinds of adventures. We see movies that are adventurous in movies. Really, I think a Christian who is in sync with the Holy Spirit and walking in faith, there's no more exciting adventure in life anywhere in the world than to live that kind of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's one of my favorite scripture verses is John 2:5. It says, do whatever He tells you. And when we step out in obedience and in faith, no matter what or how crazy it sounds, what the Lord, leads us to do is laying on our heart. There's no more exciting journey.
Wow. And so the creation, first of all, Mr. How Do You Do is a series of children's. Now, at one time it was just a book, but now it has become multiple books and even in another language. We're going to talk about that. Tell us about what's happening, how this is developed.
Well, the Lord initially laid the burden. A vacation Bible school group of young children came to the house of prayer and laid on my heart the burden to write a book on prayer for children, providing Jan Hamilton as an amazing illustrator to illustrate the books. And so initially it was one book on prayer, Dr. Seuss themed, a Christian Dr. Seuss, with the gospel message at the end of it. Then it quickly grew to two books. Second book is on pride, humility, and a third book on Creator God, children knowing their Creator. And, my publisher, Bart Darmer, I just have to shout out to him. He's an amazing publisher with Anovo Publishing. He has said to me, "How many books, Kelly, do you think this will be?" And I said, "Well, Dr. Seuss had quite a few. We'll just see how many the Lord brings." But it just continues to multiply.
And so how many have been published so far?
So far, we have 4 published. One is in Spanish. That's the book number 1, Mr. How Do You Do Learns to Pray in Spanish. And then, again, book 1, Mr. How Do You Do Learns to Pray, teaching children the joy and simplicity of prayer. Book 2, Mr. How Do You Do Changes I to You, teaching children about humility. And then book 3, Mr. How Do You Do Sees Creation in You, teaching children to know the Creator, Creator God.
That's right. And I think as a parent, even as a grandparent too, we're looking for ways to communicate biblical values, biblical truth to our children in light of such a competitive, high-tech media world where we see, the Saturday morning cartoons aren't the same as they used to be when you and I were growing up. And we're seeing a lot of values and principles and things that we really don't want instilled in our kids, and they get drawn to by watching things. But finding creative ways that we can communicate these stories of truth and helping practical our kids to pray, I just returned from a trip to Nicaragua where my son and I got to meet my daughter-in-law for the first time. It was a wonderful trip. While I was there, I have a son and my granddaughter that live here in Memphis, and I was communicating with my son. He said, "Dad, we were driving, and Layton, she's almost 4 now, but she said, 'Stop, Daddy, we have to pray for Poppy and Mimi now.'" She's just not even 4 years old. Being able to find ways to teach our kids how important it is to talk to God. And that's what prayer is, isn't it? Just
Absolutely.
Talking to God.
Mm-hmm. And, I recently heard a quote, "If we don't teach our children to follow Christ, the world will teach them not to." And that's really the vision for this series. We want to teach children to follow Christ. There's a gospel message in the end of every book, and the presentation of this is how you can know Jesus. Would you like to give your life to Jesus? And even a spot for children to sign and date when they've prayed that salvation prayer.
Wow, that is exciting. And, I've also heard it said too, Kelly, that a majority, I don't know what the percentage is, but most salvation can occur anytime. We know there was a thief on the cross. Salvation occurred in his life before he died. And salvation can occur to anyone at any age, and we realize that. But typically, percentage-wise, most salvations occur before the age, I think, of 16, 17 years old. And the heart of a child, because it's so tender and it's open, it reaches out in faith all the time anyway to mom and dad, trusting mom and dad. And so it can be a natural transition if a parent can teach them some of the ways to trust God, how to talk to God, And so this whole series, Mr. How Do You Do, is great. I want to read this quote here that came from Millie. She said, "I just finished reading your book to my twin 6-year-old grandsons at bedtime, and one said, 'This is just the best book you've ever read to us.' He said, 'Please read this every week to us.' And so precious, and what a great book. The hard copy is on its way for the baby shower. Thanks again for signing it, Millie." What does it mean for you and your team to get responses like that?
Absolutely amazing. It means so much. And I think what means most is when I hear children coming to faith after they've read our series. And we feel like it's more than just one seed. Often a parent who's reading the book to the child, the Lord is sowing seeds in their heart and drawing them closer. So
That's true. It's not just impacting the children. I mean, I'd like to hear a good story. I like to be read to myself. So, yeah, I think this is great. Well, you mentioned another great name on your team, Jan Hamilton. Jan, you have the creative ability in your writing and the story, developing the story of Mr. How Do You Do? And then you find this creative lady, Jan Hamilton, who is very artistic.
Amazing.
And the two talents just blend together and create this whole project. Jan, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to see you
be
again.
here. Again. I love being here.
This time live. So talk about the journey for you, Jan. When Kelly first came and talked about this project, Mr. How Do You Do, the first book on prayer, did you ever imagine that you would be illustrating numerous books after that?
I had no earthly idea. Isn't God good? Two women introduced us and didn't even know why they did it. They just said, you need to know Kelly. And the next thing I knew, she called me up and read me this book. And she said, I think you've illustrated some books, haven't you? And she thought I'd illustrated children's books, but I hadn't. And the next thing I knew, I was illustrating a children's book. But I have to tell you, it was all just a matter of prayer. God would wake me up in the night, and he'd give me visions of what the words meant, what they looked like as far as Mr. How Do You Do, and the animals that were in the story, birds.
Yeah, and these are personified birds who are very much a part of the story.
Absolutely. There's a robin named Ruby that's in the first one on prayer, and the last one was a chickadee named Dee. And in the middle was a very proud seagull named Sam.
As I mentioned, my trip, it's fresh on my heart right now coming from Nicaragua, but my wife and my daughter-in-law were doing some shopping, and of course, guys, it's okay, but not really into buying clothes, I'm glad you can buy clothes, but it's not my thing. And I just kind of glanced out the window, and I saw across the way these parrots. I mean, these weren't like store parrots. These were like live parrots, up on top of a building. And so I was intrigued for the next half hour, taking my camera and trying to get the best shots of these parrots. Birds are wonderful, too, of God's creation, and being able to use those into the story and implement their. So how do you implement their particular? Say if you have a red bird or a particular kind of bird that might have its own nature, how do you try to draw from that? Do you draw from that into communicating the truth?
Absolutely. That Ruby, the first bird, has on a red vest, and she's very proud of that red vest, and she thanks God for it all the time. The black-capped chickadee, that just speaks for itself, is wearing a black cap, of course. And it's just so much fun. And the persona of the seagull named Sam is interesting, too, because he is so cocky, so proud. And then after he gets humbled, because we all know that pride comes before a fall, then he has this sweet spirit. And the Lord just gives this to me. It's not me. I have to emphasize it is the Lord. And the bad drawings are definitely mine, and the good ones are definitely his.
Well, and another part of the creation, Mr. How Do You Do, is not only the books which you're able to read to the children, you also have is this a doll?
It is. Well, it's a plush toy.
A plush toy is the new terminology here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Hey, why don't you hold those plush we're not shooting video right now, but I am taking pictures along during the interview, because I'm going to post these on Facebook so listeners can go back, look at Facebook. So we'll get great pictures of the plush toys of Mr. How Do You Do. And tell me about the creation and who designed these for you.
Well, again, our amazing publisher contacted a toy company. I don't know the name of the toy company, but really ran with the idea. And I want to point out, this is not just any plush toy. This has Mr. How Do You Do holding his heart that says Jesus. And Jan Hamilton is the one who came up with that amazing drawing. And
hey, move the hands down just a little bit. I want to get a picture of that.
Okay,
can you move his hands down?
Oh, his hands down?
I want to see that heart. Now go ahead and tell me about it.
Well, just the fact that Jesus is in his heart. And every book, he retells the story at the end of how at a young age, his heart was very empty and nothing could fill it. And then the opportunity, would you like to ask Jesus to fill your heart too? I was with about 250 children in an elementary school, asked that question, and I can't even tell you the hands that went up, and to listen to probably 100, 150 children praying to accept Jesus into their heart, no greater joy. And that's why we do what we do.
Oh, my. What a great story, a great opportunity, again, to share the love of Jesus with these children. Well, as we've been talking about the book, and you mentioned that the book now has been translated into Spanish. As I just mentioned, just returning from Nicaragua, one of my greatest regrets on the entire trip that I was there for 10 days, I don't speak Spanish, other than hola and just very, very basic words, but I couldn't carry a conversation. But it gave me a desire to learn it now, especially that I have a daughter-in-law that is a Nicaraguan and speaks Spanish, obviously. So Kathy Scruggs is here with us right now. And Kathy, when we talk about Espanol, you are the...
Senora Scruggs.
Yeah, Senora Scruggs. And hola.
Hola. Well, thank you for inviting me to come.
Tell me, Kathy, about how you got involved with these two great ladies here.
Well, as you've already heard, this was the Lord's doing. I met Kelly several years ago. She spoke to our women's retreat, and before I knew it, I was inviting her to, I just said, do you by any chance need a house? And her story was, well, I've actually been letting the Lord know that I'd love there to be a house where I could have a house of prayer. And I said,
wait a minute now. Is your house the house of prayer house?
Our son's.
Tell me the story here. This is great.
It is a crazy story. But anyway, so Kelly, I said, well, let's just go into the house and pray. It's been on the market for sale for over a year. I think that was spring of 2012. And so we used to go in the house. He had left Memphis. He I think he was in New York at the time. And so we would go into the house and pray, Lord, if it be your will, let this become a house of prayer. Anyway, to make a long story short, it was on several months, and we made a deal that Kelly was going to move in 1st of August of 2012. Well, one time the realtor took some people to see it, and the alarm went off, and they had to leave. And she called me and said, could you get your son to turn off the alarm? And I called him, and he said, I've never used the alarm. He had owned the house for about 3 years and never had turned on the alarm. So it was very strange to us that this alarm started going off with these people. But anyway, so when Kelly presented her Mr. How Do You Do to me, I learned to speak Spanish when I was an exchange student to Chile when I was 17. So I've taught here in Memphis. I taught for 9 years.
And you said it appropriately, Chile. Not
Yes.
chili like we say in the South. I had a bowl of chili last night for dinner, okay?
But anyway, I've taught Spanish in Memphis for a number of years and been on mission trips to Latin America for like the last 20. So I said to Kelly, when she showed me her beginning manuscript, I said, well, since it's rhyming, I'll say that if the Lord allows me to translate it, I would love to do that. But since it's rhyming, I'm not real sure if I'm going to be able to. It'll be if the Lord allows it. And it flowed, and every time I would get the phrases, I just felt so happy to know that the Lord was really enabling me to translate it.
So you mean that the rhyming flow that Mr. How Do You Do is in English, you were able to translate the same type of rhythm and flow into Spanish?
Yes, and it's not literal. For example, I couldn't say red robin or robin redbird. I couldn't say that because a redbird is a patirroja. So instead of saying petirroja, I couldn't say robin petirroja. I said pati petirroja. So this is all about pati petirroja, which translates as a Patty the redbird in Spanish.
Oh.
But it had to be that. And the same thing with the second book, a gaviota. A gaviota is a seagull. Well, I couldn't say Sam Gaviota. I had to say Gabi Gaviota. So that's the thing. But the message is the same, and I read it to the families in Honduras last November, and it was just the same as when the English people listened. The parents would chuckle, the children would smile, and it just touched the hearts.
So, Kelly, what about for you when you realized that the book was translatable in the same heartbeat that you had, communicating that message into Spanish? Tell me about your feelings about that.
Oh, just amazed. In fact, Kathy sent me a copy of the audio of the translation, and I had tears. And the amazing thing is I don't know Spanish. So it was as if I could just sense his spirit through the words. And that's Jesus giving these translations. There's no doubt in my mind that we will have this translated into other translations, because the heart of this book is to get Jesus out into homes, into schools. And so I believe he will continue to translate it.
Now, Jan, in your part, did you have to do any type of adjustments in the Spanish edition, in the artwork or anything?
Well, I'd love to tell you that I did, but the truth is it is the exact same artwork. We just used what was already in existence and changed the words.
So the pictures themselves were fine,
It's
Kathy.
amazing. Pray is 4 letters, and orar is 4 letters. So the cover of the book is, and this one thing about Mr. How Do You Do Learns to Pray, these 4 boxes worked. We just changed the letters into Spanish.
So
The Lord was really good about it.
really, really, really good. Okay, so you were mentioning some of the books in the series. We talked about Mr. How Do You Do Learns to Pray, Changes I to You. And there was something else I wanted you to mention too, Kelly, I saw on the website, is this family prayer kit.
Yes, absolutely. It's a great kit, a chance for children not only to have the paperback of Mr. How Do You Do Learns to Pray. Another key that Jan Hamilton's being very humble and not mentioning, she has done a 10-week curriculum accompanying book 1. That's in the prayer kit. 10 weeks teaching your children how to pray on the Lord's, based on the Lord's Prayer, but with activities, and that's in the kit. There's also a prayer journal for your children to journal their prayers. Many different things in that prayer kit. That's all on our website, but great chance to teach your children how to pray.
Now, Jan, so this prayer kit is something that a family would do together, father, mother, or in a situation, maybe a single-parent home. It's still adaptable to whatever the family situation is.
Absolutely. It works well for homeschool children as well.
Okay. And so is this something you would do daily, weekly, or how does that work?
It's set up as a 10-week curriculum, so you would do it on a daily basis, but the same message for the whole week. So each day has an activity. For example, in one of them, you're making a prayer box to put your prayers into. And it just, each day has a different activity. There's also a coloring book that goes with it. And so the children can color a picture each week.
You know, something else I was thinking, because we are seeing more and more in our neighbors in the Hispanic community and the moving into our community. And so, you know, as you want to be able to share the love of Christ in a warm and inviting way, Kathy, I was just thinking, you know, if someone moves in the neighborhood with children or grandchildren, these books could be a great welcome gift, you know?
Well, I'm actually going on a trip in January to Mexico, to Casa Mami, which is a home for street children. And we're going to read and give away 75 copies there. Then we're going down to Honduras and visit 3 different other places to share the love of Christ and share how Mr. How Do You Do Learns to Pray.
Now, is this the only book so far that's been translated?
I've actually translated the second book, but it's not published yet. And I did get to share that with a neighborhood Bible study in a Hispanic housing complex in Houston, Texas last summer. I was amazed how these 3rd and 4th graders applied the points of humility, comparing the world's way versus God's way.
And so each book also ends, Kelly, with the opportunity to receive Jesus.
Yes, absolutely. That was something so key in this series, and they always will. Everyone will give the opportunity for children to accept Christ.
Well, I wished I had known about the Spanish version before I went to Nicaragua. I probably could have taken some, and maybe I'll return again, or we'll figure out a way to get some of those copies
Absolutely.
Down. That's a great opportunity. Okay, now, time is slipping away. We're doing a live show here today with Kelly Johnson, Jan Hamilton, Kathy Scruggs with the Mr. How Do You Do project, the book series reaching kids with wonderful stories of prayer, of humility, of God's creation, finding true love, sharing the gospel of Jesus with children. And so if you would like to connect with these ladies and learn more about Mr. How Do You Do, what's the website?
MrHowDo.com. That's MrHowDo.com.
And so you're going to be here for a few more days, aren't you, in town?
Yes, I am.
So all the Kelly Johnson fans, and I know I got tons of them on Facebook, and people know about Kelly and learning about Jan and Kathy also, you better connect, want to talk to her before you go. Make sure you can buy several cases of books from her. Order them so that you can distribute them in your classes, in your neighborhoods. And so this is great. And also, how do you get the plush toy?
The plush toy you can get through our website. The books you can get through Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And I just want to, they are selling out quickly. So order great Christmas presents, but they are on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Christian Book.
Well, it has been so exciting to just follow you ladies from the project ground floor. And, of course, Kelly and I have been friends even before Mr. How Do You Do was even in her mind, I guess, or that she ever told me about. So it's neat to see how God has brought all this together and is moving you together for his kingdom. And thank you so much, Kathy, Jan, Kelly, for being our guest today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, friends, that's all the time we have on this edition of Mid-South Viewpoint Live today. I'm Byron Tyler. Hey, thanks for listening. Special hello shout out to my dad today. We had lunch together, and I think he's listening. I want to say hi to him. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.